Hi, y'all. This is Kristen Chenoweth.
Hi, I'm Gloria Stefan.
This is Sarah Bareilles.
Hi, I'm Patty Lapone.
This is Lin-Manuel Miranda. You're listening to the Broadway Podcast Network.
Welcome to Guys Who Like Musicals.
Welcome to Guys Who Like Musicals.
Shit. Wait. Is that what happened? That's what happening, Dan? What's going on?
Kind of.
This is three guys who like musicals today.
This is the Guys Who Like Musicals double feature, kind of, right?
Yeah. The trifecta.
I have no idea how we're supposed to start this, so I guess
right.
we've started.
That's
it's
what
begun.
I mean. We started it the way we usually start, which is, we didn't tell you at all. We didn't ask you what you wanted to do.
I appreciate that.
Just shoot from the hip.
Shoot from the hip. That's what it should be. So for those listening, welcome to a very special, strange and weird crossover episode.
Here you go. 1, 2, 3.
Is this like The Simpsons and Futurama right now? Can we Can we put ourselves on that level?
We've got right. Rick and Morty are about to make their appearance.
Yeah, it's like the universe of SVU and Chicago Med Fire.
Yeah,
PD.
It's
any
the
of
Dick
those
Wolf crossover special.
Yeah. Or better yet, the what's the one up in that our Carlos is on? The Flash. It's the Flash.
The Flash.
And
Arrow and Supergirl.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's the Dave Rappaport universe. But also, while we're doing this, is he frozen?
Yeah. Alan's video is frozen. You'd think that after a year of this nonsense that it would get easier, but we still don't know how to use any of these platforms that we're using to make a living.
I'm sorry, we?
I mean, you're the one that just had a mic issue for 20 minutes before we started this
for
thing.
The first time. That's true. That's true. This must be a good day for you. Joe wins this one, everyone.
I know, exactly. That is part of our show, Alan, that we continue, Dan and I, treat each other, we rib each other constantly. So we love each other very much, but it might sound like we hate each other.
Well, how did you guys meet? Tell me that story, because you don't have any Broadway credits the same, right?
No.
Yeah, no. We met in college. Not yet. We met in college. Dan was a year below me at the University of Michigan. Honestly, we were friends. We were friendly, but it wasn't. I feel like we didn't really become tight until my senior year. Almost going out of my senior year, where we really sort of hit on, at least how I remember it. It was golf. Golf was one.
We used to play golf. We were kind of friends. But it was the, kind of friends. Also, how musical theater programs are. We were always doing the same track. They were in the same pigeonhole that we were supposed to be the same person, which is hilarious now looking back because we couldn't be more different. And then it was driving to the Muni for auditions for the Muni.
Yes.
My junior year. And we were in the car, Alan, and we were talking about the future of content and entertainment. And I was pitching Joe on how I believed that there was not going to be any cable networks anymore. Everything was going to be streaming. Netflix is the future. And I pitched him on this idea that I have for a not-for-profit, which I won't get into here. And he was like, and that was the first time that that was essentially our first writing session.
Yeah.
It was us kind of coming together as one mind and being oh, okay, we actually have a lot of the same ideas about the world. And then from then on, we were really close friends. That was spring of his senior year.
That's exactly it. I remember that it was a long drive.
It was a 9 and 10 hour drive. Alex was asleep in the back seat.
And we are up in the front seat, and basically the whole idea stemmed. We don't need to go into it too much, but it was we were both obsessed with Joe Papp and his legacy in the theater, and so we were talking about why we couldn't do something like what Joe Papp did for theater, but do it for television and film. And so we're trying.
You just gave away my idea, Joe.
No, that gave away nothing.
Alan, that is my $1 million idea that he has just given away on the internet.
What have we learned in our writing, Dan? What we know in our writing is that no one can make the idea the way you can make the idea. We need to
You're
pitch all of our ideas constantly. And then Alan
No.
can sit here and be like, hey guys, I don't get it. And then we can say, listen, here's, okay, no one's going to steal our idea. Is that
Fine.
It's your personal touch that makes it work. Otherwise it's just not going to happen. And okay, so driving, Alex is in the back seat, everything's fine. You come back and you start writing, and so coming to New York and everything, did you guys keep in touch? I mean, obviously you did, but were you close, or was that the point after college when you're like, Joe, you came to the city and you're like, I'm a BMOC now, I'm the big man, hire me. And I mean, when did the paths start to reconverge, or did they ever diverge?
I don't think they ever diverged.
They never really didn't after that, because we kept in pretty constant touch. And I will say that Dan was the person who I have always had a block as far as a creator of things. I like to be an interpreter. I like for somebody to give me a script or give me a song, and I'm going to go do my thing. That's where I'm the most comfortable. When I have to make my own things, I am uncomfortable. I don't like it. It's incredibly vulnerable. And Dan has always been the guy who's like, let's do it. Let's write the thing. Let's make the thing. Let's make the podcast. Let's write the script. Let's do the thing. And I am also here being like, okay. So what's cool about looking back on it is like that never stopped. Dan would always, he'd call with ideas. Hey, what if we did this? What if we did that? What if we, and that has been a constant in our life for the last, 9 to 10 years since of just.
Yeah, we never really disconnected.
Yeah.
I think Joe went and worked on his first Broadway show right out of school. And then he came back and we had lunch in some restaurant on Main Street, Joe. Not Main Street. It was like the street off of State. It was like the one that you went east
Liberty?
and west instead of north and south. Maybe, yeah. It was some restaurant on Liberty, and you told me that you booked Romeo and Juliet from an EPA, and you bought my lunch, and I was like, this guy's great. He bought my lunch. So basically, I have been working as a video freelancer. I'm kind of building out my video production business as we speak, and Joe is actually helping me with that. So now we have like 9 businesses together, which is hilarious and funny, which is why we're always making fun of each other on the show because we can't stand each other most of the time. But I had all of this gear because I was shooting all of these videos for people. So I had a similar cardioid microphone to the one you're using, Alan. And I had a pencil microphone that I was using to do my like boom miking for video work. And I had these 2 things sitting around. And I had actually had an idea for a podcast. In 2016, I interviewed Jim J. Bullock in my hotel room on my voice memos on my phone about his career because he was a very successful sitcom actor in the 80s, and he was in Kinky Boots with me. And I was like, I don't really know. I didn't even know what podcasting was at that time. I don't know why I did that. But I think back on that now, and I'm like, I should pull that out of the woodwork and see if that would make a good episode or somehow. But the idea for the podcast was mine, but you came up with the name. Is that what we've decided?
Yeah, that's what we've settled on. That's how the story goes. Was that you came to me and you were like, I want to start a podcast. I have the gear. It was like a chicken or the egg conversation. It was like, I have the stuff. So if I have the stuff, let's do something. And we were coming up with, what could we do? And I was like, Dan, we're just a couple of guys who like musicals. What if we just talked about musicals and called it Guys Who Like Musicals? And Dan was like, I think you wanted it to be something more important. You wanted it to sound like the backstage experience, the Broadway behind the curtain.
We had a list of words. It was like Broadway, talk, podcast.
Yeah.
It was trying to put all those things together, and Guys Who Like Musicals was just too good. It was like told you exactly what it was.
Yeah.
Which I think is the best title.
Yeah. So that's how it was born.
Mine's even more generic and lame.
It's exactly what you want.
No, it tells you exactly what it is.
If you want a theater podcast, you go to Alan Seal's Theater Podcast.
It's just
honestly did you have to fight people for that domain? That's like one of those things. It's like, I can't believe this didn't exist already.
No, and that's why I chose it, because I was like, curtain call pocket, no, that exists. All right, backstage, what up? No, that's taken. Spotlight, I was looking for all these theater-y related sort of things, and then I was just like, okay, the theater podcast, and I registered both theater TRE and TER. They were both available, and I was like,
Very
I guess
smart.
that's my name. Guess that's my name now. But
great.
now, that's what I'm sticking with, and I'm finding myself sort of at an existential crisis that I don't know if you found yourself in, being that you are guys who like musicals, but you're also, I suspect, guys who like TV shows and guys who like movies and other things, right? So now I'm getting into interviewing people who are more than just Broadway people, and from a press perspective, right? It's like, how do you have a TV star on the theater podcast? So I'm like, do I change the name? But it's branding, but it's years of work, and I lose sleep over this sometimes.
How did you start yours? Like, because I would love, just because this is the Riverdale crossover episode, you interviewed me for the theater podcast back when I was doing Frozen. We met back doing a Google Talk for Bandstand. How did all this start for you?
Oh gosh, well, how far back do you want me to start in my origin story? I got a computer science degree.
Your parents went on a date, and
I assume so. my mother, when I was in high school, my mother whips out a photo of me, or a photo of her, and she's like, "You're about a day old inside me in this picture." And I was like, "God, Mom,
Mom.
That means the day before. Ew.
Yeah, we got it.
So
I know. That's why you make fun.
I was conceived on a road trip in Washington State.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, that's about as far back. That's as much as I want to know. Right. So anyway, yeah. So I'll leave out some unimportant stuff. Yeah. So I grew up unimportant. Well, my blood type is. Right. So I grew up in North Carolina, was always doing chorus, singing, acting, dancing as much as I could, but I always had this other half of my brain that just couldn't stop taking apart things and building, and the electronics engineering side. So my parents gave me some advice that I listened to, which was, you can act with a computer science degree, but you can't do computer science with an acting degree. And so basically
wow, that's good. That's a good one. that hurts.
Yeah.
That hurts. I'm like, ow. You're right.
Yes.
You're right.
That's like for 99% of your listeners, that sounds really, how wise. Your parents were wise. And for the two guys you're talking to, they want to go jump off a bridge.
It just hurts.
But it's funny. It's funny you brought up Google Talks, right? So okay, let me skip over some stuff. So computer science degree, and then with my computer science degree, I got out of college and became a professional actor with said computer science degree, and then moved to New York in 2007 during the writer's strike. Fell back. I did my fallback, went back on computers, and then that's when I actually moved to New York. Was during that time, and I was doing regional theater until then. And have never auditioned a day in my life in New York. And I've been here coming up on 13 years, I think. Just hit 13 years.
Wow.
So, and then in my computer career, worked for Thomson Reuters for a while, did some post-production work at a studio I was running their IT department, and then found my way now at Google as an engineer. And then the Talks at Google program, which is like internal TED Talks for Google, I found myself running that program on a global scale. And one of the things I wanted to do was bring in Broadway casts, because no one was doing that. And one of literally the first one I brought in was Cinderella, with Santino and Laura Osnes. And then from there, it was just this snowball effect, and ended up bringing in Bandstand, which Joe was in, and that's when we met, and that was years and years ago. So through all of this, I found the love of bringing information to the world and educating the world, and peeling back the layers of people that and exposing things, not in a bad way, but just stuff you didn't know about individuals. Like getting that out there was so appealing and so satisfying to me. And it became a bit of a catharsis in a therapeutic sort of way for me to like share problems with people that, you don't normally think of them as humans. Everybody poops, but you don't talk about pooping. So why not talk about pooping?
Right.
I mean, not literally, but metaphorically.
The metaphor. So, you could have picked anything, but like, that's a pretty popular children's book, I think, right?
So in growing the talks program, the more I grew, the more I led, the less day-to-day I was involved with, which meant the less moderation, less planning of events. And I sort of started to miss the whole face-to-face like this and having long-form conversations. And so I couldn't sleep one night, and it was literally like 3 a.m. I couldn't sleep. I was like, you know what? I'm going to try this podcast thing. This was a couple years ago. And I couldn't find any podcasts. I was just searching for Broadway in Apple Podcasts, and I couldn't find anything that was actively releasing, anything that was new content. So I said, all right, I guess, and this is literally all within a span of like 15 minutes. I was like, okay, well, maybe, I know people now through all of this. Maybe I'll start my own. And so that's when I GoDaddy on my phone, I was looking for domain names, thinking of names, and that's when I found thetheaterpodcast.com was available. And I was like, I guess that's the name of my podcast now. And then I just texted a bunch of people that I knew, and Andy and Orfe were literally my first interviews, and Wes Taylor and some others that I had met in the years of being in New York and being, in this industry, and away it went. So that was, Ariana DeBose was my first published interview. Andy and Orfe were my first actual interviews timeline-wise. And yeah, it's just been a roller coaster ride ever since. So it's and through that is how I met is how I met Dori Berenstein, which is how the Broadway Podcast Network all came about.
Right.
Yeah.
Which you guys put together in 2018.
I interviewed her for my podcast December 2019. By January 2018. By January 2019, we were already up and running off on our business plan. Started secretly, not secretly, just, you don't announce things yet. We were building the network and building the website by early summer, October 2018, it launched. That was our official big launch. We had a big old party at Sardi's. And then, so that was October 2019. Everything's going super great, getting stuff. And then the global pandemic hits. And here we are. Broadway shuts down.
We were tracking it live. That's been crazy, right?
That is crazy. And you know what? I haven't actually gone back and listened to the people that we were talking to, Dan, around, February and March of this year, because I know that one of the things, and we talked about this on our show, is that we felt so handicapped, as so many people did, to create content. We were like, we don't want to go to our friends because our show, these are all friends and colleagues. Yeah. Like we don't want to say like, hey, do you want to come on our show and talk about why you love musicals when there's no musicals in sight?
Right.
So that was a learning thing over the summer for sure. But to get to track it and to get to track like how people are dealing with it and where they are. And I remember when we talked to Robin Herder, Dan, before she was nominated for a Tony, there was still this feeling of like, they were just, their bodies were recovering from doing Moulin Rouge 8 times a week. Mm-hmm. And they were still, and so she was like, their time, time with my son and my body, I'm able to heal because my body is being destroyed. And that was, I forget exactly when we did that. I think it was June.
I think that was something. May,
we
may have released it in June, but we did the interview in May.
Yeah, we did it.
And we were still thinking the end of summer at that point. I wasn't. But
no, Dan wasn't.
I have been king pessimism. I've been the minute I found out this was happening, I was like, okay, it's going to be a year and a half. I might as well find another career.
I remember when it was supposed to be 2 weeks.
Right.
I know.
Yeah, it was supposed to be 2 weeks. I saw the last preview of 6 on March 11th. They were supposed to open March 12th.
On the 12th, right.
Yeah, March 12th is when Broadway shut down. 5 o'clock on the 12th is when it was announced. So 3 hours before their opening night.
Crazy. That's just
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah, insane. And then Joe, like you've been in Frozen. Frozen decided just to close up in the middle of all this.
Yeah, which was wild. I felt, when I've talked about this a bit, but like Frozen was one of the best jobs I've ever had because everybody on that show was just a total pro. There was a lot of people who had done a bunch of shows and they had families and lives and stuff. And so we just had a great working relationship. Everybody worked hard and everybody went home. It was just like one of the best, jobs that I've ever had. And then I was not asked to re-sign. Patty and Casey were not asked to re-sign. They were going to change over the cast, which long-running shows do sometimes. And when they let us know, that was painful in the moment because it was like, hey, maybe I would want to stay in Frozen for another year, or whatever. But it was like, no,
Wait,
okay.
So this conversation was happening. So March 12th, Broadway shuts down. So when is the contract renewal discussion happening?
Well, so this was
before.
This is way before. So this was back probably in November, October of the previous year. So they came to us and they said, hey, we're going to start looking for some people. Thank you so much for your time, but we're not going to renew your contract. End of February was when our contracts were up. And we were, so we were like, oh, that was sad, but like we had a great time. And Patty and Casey were obviously very emotional because they had created the whole thing. But then we're leaving, and we know that we're leaving at the end of February. And when you're leaving a Broadway show and you know that it's closing, you go into hibernation, squirrels with the nuts mode, and you're just saving as much money as possible because you have no idea when your next job is going to come. So we just like battened down the hatches. My wife, Alex, was in Come From Away. She left Come From Away in November. And we were just like, okay, we're going to try to save, like, we might not have a job for 6 months. So all of a sudden, Broadway shuts down, and the new cast had done 2 weeks of performances, 2.5 weeks of performances, and everything shuts down. We were in such a grateful position because we had been preparing for some type of, we weren't preparing for a year and a half of no income, but we were preparing for 6 months, So we got through, we're okay. We're keeping our heads above water, but it was like, that was a wild gift in all of this. When you just look at like the little gifts where you're like, I can't believe that this, in the midst of all of this horror, anything positive that has come from this, just the fact that like Alex and I had a couple of months to prepare was like, should not have happened. You know what I mean? And so many people in our community don't have that. So
yeah. I felt the same way that I'd done 2 years at Waitress, like leading up to this. And like I had some friends who had just made their Broadway debut in Frozen.
Right.
And hadn't saved any money.
Right.
Hadn't gotten it. Like I had all this health insurance left over. So many people didn't have that. And here we all are now a year later. That's the part that really is upsetting.
Well, what did you pivot to? You said you started a new career. Are you doing more of like full-time video production?
Well, it's a lot of things. Joe and I first kind of like dug back into our writing. We started writing together in 2016. Joe was on a hiatus between shows, one of the only periods of his career where he didn't have kind of lots of jobs lined up, and we were trying to figure out, and I was used to that. I've always had, a year and a half between big jobs, so I'd gotten used to kind of finding my own path, and we fell into this writing project. We had no idea what we were doing, but we ended up kind of putting something interesting together. It was a TV show about a couple of kids at the University of Colorado Boulder who start a brewery in their basement. And in the pilot, this whole like thing happens. This undercover police break into their house, and they use it as a marketing opportunity to build their brand. And it's like a Silicon Valley for the everyman is kind of the idea. And it's about like kind of the beer industry and stuff. And that was our first project we wrote together. And we ended up pitching it to Comedy Central in 2016. And then we didn't do anything else. We didn't write again for 4 years. And then a global pandemic hit. We had built a podcast at that point and done some video projects here and there together, but nothing really substantial. And then we jumped back into it in 2020. And started working on another television show, which we've talked about now a couple of times on the podcast, but is still in its development phases, and hopefully we will actually make at some point.
Oh yeah, it's going to happen. But then also Dan has become a full-time. I mean, listen, we do
full-time, part-time. It's like that's
full-time.
I should have a T-shirt that says full-time, part-time because that is me.
Yep. Yes, Dan has probably a solid eight to 10 jobs that are like.
I think eight is steep, but it's definitely 5. It's
definitely
five. What could be full-time jobs.
And I've come up with this phrase where it's just like we're cobbling together in existence. Like we're just, it's like, wait, you want to give me $1,000 to do a concert? Great. You want to give me a couple $1,000 to do this thing? Cool. Can we make a podcast? Yes. We're like, and then eventually at the end of the year, we are above the poverty line.
and starting to actually pay our bills, which is really nice. I mean, You get it, Alan, because like you have this full-time job and then you have your side hustle. You're still working with Google, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you get like kind of the multiple hustles, and now you have BPN. It's just kind of like that's how the business world works. You have kind of like different entities that are all getting pushed together. But my newest one is just is real estate. So I'm kind of building a real estate business. I got my real estate license. I'm really interested in like getting into the investment property space, kind of like a way to funnel any money I could make as an actor into something, maybe doing like a network of Airbnbs or something like that. Not necessarily in like being a real estate agent, but it does fit into all of the other things that I can do, like video and marketing and that stuff. So,
Ryan Serhant from $1 Million Listing New York, that guy, he's a failed actor. Self-proclaimed failed actor. He moved to New York to act and be a hand model, both of which didn't work out, lied his way into $1 Million Listing, and now is making multi-million-dollar deals. I did an event with him the other day. He actually told a story of on his wedding day was a major deal fell through. So he was like before his wedding on his phone, trying to salvage a deal that wouldn't hold together. And be careful of that, because that is not the life I want. And I do not wish that on you.
No, but I think about this a lot because work-life balance is a thing that is like really important to a lot of people. And
but not me. I don't care.
No, I mean that's where I'm headed. That's where I'm headed. Because listen, like I actually, if my days, like when I have my free time, I'm doing other business stuff. Like I don't know how to not, like I'm budgeting future projects while I'm watching TV, and I'm texting Joe, like bugging him because he wants to have a work-life balance, but I just don't know how to do that. So like, I don't want to be texting on my wedding day, but there is such a thing as like, I mean, if it works, it works. Like happiness is your own happiness. And if you manage your own schedules, I guess. I don't know. That's kind of where
I don't have a good work-life balance. Are you kidding me? Like you and I are texting at 7:00 in the morning, and then we work, and then I'm coaching until 11, and I've canceled every single vacation I've ever planned because I get an audition or a job. Like what do you mean work-life balance?
But I also think it's so arbitrary. Like why should somebody tell us what our work-life balance should be? It's like whatever you want.
It has to be. And that's the thing. You have to have it be whatever you want it to be. And like, Alan, you have two kids, two kids?
Yeah. A 4 and a 6-year-old. Yeah.
Yeah.
Boys, two boys.
And I'm married, and Dan's in a long-term serious relationship too. Like we prioritize those people above anything. They are like, right. My wife is my whole world. So if she comes to me and is like, you got to stop texting Dan at 7:00 in the morning, then that's how I know that the work-life balance is out of whack.
That it's gone too far. Exactly.
It's gone too far. We have had those conversations. But I don't know. How do you, I don't know that now that we got on work-life balance, but Alan, how do you deal with, I mean, you have 2 kids in a pandemic and you have 14 businesses going. What the hell?
Yeah. Therapy, if I'm being honest. So before a couple of years ago, I just started seeing a therapist a couple of years ago. And that has helped me realize my motivation for overworking, because Dan, I'm a lot like you in that I'll be I'll be watching TV with somebody I care about, and I'm like, okay, well, hold on, I'm thinking about this other thing. I gotta get this email out, or whatever the case is. So I'm always trying to now consciously be in the moment, be present with who I'm with, right? But that speaks to the larger picture of like why I'm overworking. So to answer your question, Joe, it's really just setting boundaries, and actually Google is really good about this. They give us extra days off that weren't corporate holidays before the pandemic, but they're like every third Friday, I think we just get it off. And it's like, just, they're not calling it a day off, just go do whatever you want. And I got over, Google sort of sets the bar for company culture in the first place in the tech world, which other companies now are starting to follow in line with. And, like Dan, Joe, you've been there. It's like there's nap pods all over the place, and couches, and free food, and places to hang out. So you're not expected to be there and work the entire time you're there, because that leads to burnout, and that leads to being unmotivated. And so I had to get over the fact that I felt guilty. I'm working at home, and literally, like, I'm one floor above my bedroom, and the bathroom's right there, and like I can sit right here where I am for 14, 16 hours a day.
Yeah.
And I don't realize what time it is. We're jumping from, Googling the day and BPN and doing these podcasts and whatever, and everything else that's going on, and watching the kids and getting them ready for school. So actually it's nice for me to have the multiple things to jump to, because jumping from one thing to the next gives me respite from whatever I was doing previously. And especially with the kids, like Monday comes around, I've been with the kids all weekend, and they're inside these past couple weeks because of the freaking snow. And so we can't go anywhere. And the pandemic's, everything's closed. The museums are closed, everything. And so like Monday comes around, I'm like, get your asses out of the door, get on the bus, get to school. I just want to go up to my room, and I want to go to my room and be quiet for a little bit.
Yeah.
And now I get on Clubhouse. I just listen on Clubhouse. There's a lot of crap on Clubhouse, but there's a couple gems in there. So I'll get on there and just listen. I like trying new stuff.
I just got in on Clubhouse today. It'll be another 8 months before Joe gets on Clubhouse. So we'll adjust that when the time comes. But I'm excited to check it out.
There's a very active podcasting community. And as somebody with an established podcast, you're already ahead of other people on there, because there's a lot of people on there that are just like, how do I start a podcast? I don't know how to use my at-home equipment. How do I monetize? Right. I don't have a podcast yet. I'm going to make millions tomorrow, like Joe Rogan, right? Like, no. No.
We're not allowed to say his name on our podcast. I might have to bleep that out.
Rojogan.
Oh gosh,
that is too funny. Alan, what are the future plans for BPN? What are you guys looking at down the barrel?
Oh goodness. Well, gosh, I'm trying to think of when this is going to air, what I can talk about. Yeah, right now we're finding a lot of success with original programming. As the Curtain Rises, completely homegrown original soap opera.
Mm-hmm.
It's a radio play soap opera is one of our best ones now, most downloaded. And it's all
next to Guys Like Musicals, of course.
Guys Like Musicals number one,
first.
number
That's
two.
Right. Great.
Right. Of course, number one. Yes. and we're finding a lot of people love this stuff, and even from a production standpoint, Homecoming on, I believe it was Wondery. I forget if it's Wondery or Earwolf. One of the other networks made this podcast, this original radio play called Homecoming. That then I believe was Amazon.
It was Gimbal.
Yeah.
Wasn't it?
Oh, was it Gimlet?
It was Gimbal.
Gimlet.
Yes.
Gimlet. Yes.
Yeah, that's sold to Spotify. Exactly.
Right. So Gimlet, somebody came to them and they turned it into a series on Hulu, I believe, or no, Amazon
Prime.
So that whole thing, so we're eyeing the creation of more original content that can push the boundaries and be later converted into either a stage production when theater comes back, or just straight up, like Netflix now, right? Like Dory, the co-founder, she's got a relationship with Netflix through The Prom and Ryan Murphy. So like those conversations are starting, and it's an exciting time
for
podcasting in general, because I don't know if anybody, and this might be the most boring thing in the world for those listening right now, but there were 17,000 podcasts launched a week in 2020. A week,
Wow.
17,000. So pandemic
people be bored.
People be bored. The average 30-day download for a single episode in 2020 was around 130. Full stop. Not 1,000, not 100, 130. So
We're better than that, Joe.
And that's all the time we have, bud.
So that's 50th percentile. But
Wow.
like the wealth gap, the top 1% are responsible for like 99% of all the podcast downloads, right? Like Joe Rogan and Dak Shepard.
It's like the
Armchair Expert
daily and
yeah. So now it's
Right.
it's this thing, and I'm sure you're experiencing this too, is how do you break outside your own echo chamber? How do you get new listeners that are not the same ones you're preaching to on your social media channels day after day? And as a network, that's a challenge.
I find it. Yeah, I didn't mean to cut you off. As a network, you find that you're having to continue to push the boundaries.
Yeah, as a network, that's a challenge too, because we're sort of like we were talking about a while ago with your guys who like musicals, and I am the theater podcast, and we are the Broadway podcast network, but we're so much more than that. And so, there's more to it. We've got video content that we're about to launch. We've got some new technology, like some iOS app technology that we're about to launch. And all of this is going to be launched, it'll be out soon, so I'm okay talking about it. But and we've got more original content talking about. But we're always trying to think about, like, how do we reach that person who has never, who didn't know about us before? Like, how do we get to that person who was like me 3 years ago, up at 3 a.m. and searching for content that they can't find? And what kind of content are they looking for? How do we bring that to them? So I would love, if anybody from Roku's listening, I want to make a Roku app so we could have a Roku channel for BPN content. Right now we haven't launched it, but it's been out there for about a week. I quietly just rolled it out. If you go to our YouTube channel, there's BPN Radio that's 24/7 episodes playing right now of our content. So it's a 24/7 live stream right now.
Wow.
So we'll throw some guys who likes musicals episodes into the mix.
Sweet.
So that way, obviously, people who can stumble through the live streams will find that stuff. They can listen to it in real time, because YouTube, amazingly, being a visual platform, people still go there for audio only content.
Right.
Crazy.
Right. So
I mean, I go to YouTube for everything. I'm a huge fan. Yeah, that's an interesting. You bring up an interesting point there. I'm really curious to see how, because there's only a certain amount of people who listen to podcasts too. Like the actual, when you think about, there's so many that were started every week, but there's still only a certain percentage of the population that actually listens to podcasts. Like the potential market share of podcasting is much larger than it is right now. And future generations like may or may not actually be engaged in it. Like I described it to one of our clients as just on-demand radio. They were like, I don't know what podcasting is. And I was like, well, it's just a radio show on demand. You can just watch it whenever you want, listen whenever you want. Yeah. But I think it's interesting to try and figure out how you can break down barriers of who listens to podcasts, who listens to theater podcasts, and at the same time kind of keep up with taste. Because I know personally, I listen to a certain podcast for 6 to 8 months, and then I'm kind of like, okay, that did its purpose.
Yeah. I say a lot to people. I say people come to a new podcast. They come for the guest. They stay for the host. So you want to get the guest. You want to get your guest to promote you. Right. So that's why, like, hopefully what we're doing right now with this episode, our listeners who didn't know about each other are going to start subscribing to both of us, and then everybody's that much happier. And because we can talk to the same person, we've each talked to Patty Murin, and we've had completely different conversations. Everybody who talks to the same guest can have a different conversation. And I think there's a lot more to be told from different podcasters. It's just number of time in the day. But to your point about saturation, oh God, I forget these stats, but it's like the world Oh, yeah, so the majority of podcasts, like 60% of podcasts globally, are consumed via Apple devices, and the next closest single consumer is Spotify at around 8%, and then below
Whoa.
that, I believe, is Stitcher at like 1 or 2. So there's a big discrepancy. Apple still got the lion's share of the way people listen, and the reason behind that is because from the beginning, near the beginning, Apple always had iTunes built into their phones. So you got an iPhone, you had immediately a way to listen to a podcast. Whereas Android devices, the majority of the world, the more of the world has Android devices than they do iPhone devices. But because Google has yet to put a default podcast player into Android, you still have to take that extra step of understanding what you're doing and downloading Google Podcasts or Castbox or whatever other player, Spotify, whatever other player you're going to use. So that's why Apple has that leg up, and I think it's it's in their very best interest to maintain that leg up, and I don't think they're doing a good job of it, if I'm being honest. Because Spotify is chipping away at them every month. There's a little bit more. And I don't know if Spotify is going to get back their investment, especially with like Joe Rogan investment, whatever that exclusivity deal was. I forget what it is. But the business side of this is huge because the market share for people who A, don't have iPhones yet, B, those who have iPhones, only 10% of those iPhone users have ever used their phone to listen to a podcast. So there's the remaining 90%, however many hundreds of millions of people holding their podcast player in their hand who have never listened to a podcast. And then there's the Android users on top of that have never downloaded a podcast app. So the potential for growth is tremendous right now. Right. And so we're kind of at the precipice of this massive shift in on-demand radio content and radio play. So right now, 2020, because of the pandemic, this is what I was going to say, is people had time to take a step back and say, like, what am I doing with my time right now? I just lost my job, or I don't have to go to work, or I'm working from home, whatever. So 17,000 people a week started a new podcast. So I think in a few months, maybe a year, the majority of those are going to be dead because they're not going to be the overnight sensations they expected to be. And then all of a sudden, we're going to be back to, there'll be some good ones that come out of it, I'm sure. But I think the number of people, new people that listen to a podcast for the first time every day is rising at the same rate. Whereas we've seen this massive spike of content that's just going to fall off again. So I don't know if you've seen your numbers flatline or maybe even decline in the last few months because more people are trying out other podcasts. But as those go away and don't remain, people are going to come back to the old tried and true stuff.
I have gotten the sense that you and I are simpatico in the way that you talk about people who are quitters and people who want to be successful fast. It seems like you have that spine in you that just wants to keep pushing. Like, what's that about? Have you always been like that? Like, how do you push yourself to kind of keep staying motivated even if you don't see results, or how do you focus on results?
I think it's a willful ignorance for failure.
Nice.
I just refuse to think that I can fail, or when I do, I'm like, oh, well, now I'll do it again and I'll do it better, because the root of all of this is I need to be liked and I need to be appreciated. And I feel internally, and I know this isn't true, my rational brain is like, you're an idiot. This isn't like this. But the same thing that makes me need to be on stage and get applause from standing on stage in front of thousands of people says, if you do good things, people are going to like you more. And so I feel like a failure means that people won't like me. Therefore, I won't allow myself to fail. So even if I do not meet a goal, I will go back, learn from what I did wrong, and then go do it again. So that's the whole. That's my internal struggle. It's the the angel and the demon, right? And the demon is always like, you're not good enough. You're hanging out with these Broadway people. You got this podcast that people listen to. You got these jobs. You're working at one of the greatest tech companies in the world. You're really a complete failure, though. Like that's my struggle pretty much daily.
Same.
Yeah. Same.
it's interesting because what you do is that you take responsibility when something doesn't work. You also take responsibility in a way that may not be totally healthy to an extent.
I think it's
which we all
the
do.
masochistic like actor thing.
Yeah.
Like even though you still like you now transitioned to podcasting and to working and for in tech, it's like no, we all still put our hand back on the fire over and over and over again. We don't even if we fail, we rationalize ourselves away from. So it's not failure. No, it's like I didn't get that job, but like that I didn't want that job anyway, and now we're moving. Through life. But I don't know. I think that creates an opportunity, like you said, to just learn and move forward as opposed to get paralyzed by fear of failing. Because you said earlier that what's his nuts from $1 Million Listing is a failed actor. And I don't think there's such a thing. I adamantly believe that there is no such thing as a failed actor, because if you go out and you do one show, then you go out and do one thing, you're an actor and you've succeeded in a way. If I quit tomorrow, I'm not going to be a failed actor. If I had quit back, back right after I graduated, if I never went to musical theater college, if I didn't, I just don't, I don't know.
I agree with you, Joe. I think that line of thinking comes from a different generation. And that's a generational difference between like people being defined as their careers. And I don't think, personally, obviously, I think that's bullshit. I have 8 careers. There is no such thing as a failed actor. You're an actor now. You may be an actor later, but you're just doing different things. Someday you might be an actor again. Acting's not going anywhere. And we don't have to define ourselves in this
I had this teacher. I had this teacher in high school he was the physics teacher. And he was in his life up to being the physics teacher, he had been a lawyer and he had been a commercial airline pilot. And now he was the physics teacher. And I was like, "But you're a lawyer?" And he was like, "No, I have a law degree. I was a lawyer. And I have my pilot's license." "Wait, so you're a pilot?" "No, I am a pilot, but I'm not." Right. You know what I mean? And like, we don't think that's crazy because we're all singer, dancer, actor, blah, blah, blah. But you have like 14,000 hats you have to wear to just like get health insurance. But like for normal people, it's like, I think that Dan, you're so right. This being defined by your career thing, I think is not, I think we're breaking away from that.
Yeah, I think we're totally in the world now where everyone, my thing for actors right now is like my best advice. And the things I'm starting to make videos about on my YouTube channel now is like, you need to find your side hustle. And if you can find a side hustle that's not in a restaurant, you're going to be better off because you probably can find a way to be a little bit more fulfilled than just serving and waiting tables, which is definitely a respectable life and a respectable future, but it doesn't work for everyone. And it isn't the only option. You can definitely go. Yeah,
we come out of school thinking a lot of times like that's the option. Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's a lot of, restaurant is such late hours most of the time that you can't get up. You just don't have the energy, or when you do, you're just dead for those 6 a.m. EPAs.
Yeah. So Dan and I worked together. Another one of the jobs. We catered together between jobs, and there were 2. Well, there was one night. First, working in restaurants. I've worked in a million restaurants and catered my whole life. My mom had a catering company for a long time, and like I have such respect for that work across the board. The 2 most fun nights that I ever had catering were with Dan. One, we were bartenders.
I had lots of fun. No,
we had we were bartending. We were bartending at an Alexander Wang Fashion Week event. It was a party, and we were just there to like sling.
It was like an arena show. There was like Kendall Jenner was there. We were slinging drinks at the main bar. I always tried to get the main bar. Go ahead, Joe.
No, but it was one of the best nights ever. And then the other time we were bartending, or like Dan was bartending, and I was like cleaning the toilets for. It was a dinner. It was a dinner for Tom Hanks, and it was dinner for Tom Hanks and Leon Bridges performed. It was the
Wall Street Journal like awards dinner,
and we should have gotten fired But we stood there. Do you remember, Dan? We're standing behind this bar.
Yep.
We're not supposed to be there. We're supposed to be working somewhere else. And Leon Bridges is up there playing River by himself with his guitar. And I was like, I don't care if I get fired. I'm going to watch this man sing this song. This is one of my favorite artists. And he's up there. He's this close to me. And the captain was coming around like, what are you guys doing here? And it was like, we're getting glasses for this bar. And the captain was like, you're not supposed to be doing that. It was like, no, we're actually.
And I said, don't worry, John. He's with me. We'll be fine. We'll be right with you.
Oh my God. Yeah. What are,
I did a lot of catering.
Fired. We should have gotten
fired. I had a lot of catering stories.
Hard. Oh my God.
Yeah. I catered. Actually, it's funny now. I served my biggest catering of it. Did you work the Ralph Lauren birthday party, Joe?
No.
I don't think so.
No.
I think you were out of town maybe doing that show you did
Alabama. Because of Winn-Dixie. Yeah. Because of Winn-Dixie that Duncan Sheik wrote. Yeah.
Yeah. I served Ralph Lauren's birthday party at the main table. It was Jessica Chastain, Anna Wintour, Ralph Lauren and his wife, and Armie Hammer.
Oh my goodness.
Oh God.
And I said, do you want the vegan option? And he said, absolutely not. So, that was a joke. That was a joke, not to make light of that. But Jessica Chastain was vegan, and she's really nice. I feel like, catering was an interesting way to make money, but also not my favorite.
Wait, am I allowed to laugh that hard at that joke?
I don't think so. We might have to cut that.
Dan and I are guys who like musicals, and we've always been guys who like musicals. The point of this show, I think, for us in the long run is that there's a lot of guys and men and women who don't do musicals, who don't have anything to do with musicals, who like them. And growing up, we were the guys who played on the hockey team who also liked musicals, and that was weird. But when we told the people that like, oh, we also like this is a part of us that is real, they would say, oh, that's kind of cool. Like I saw Les Mis one time. That is the only qualifier that like gets you in the club of someone who likes musicals. So my hope is like, in my perfect world, someday I would love to talk to Barack Obama about why he chose to bring Hamilton to the White House, why he loves musical theater, like that sort of thing. There are millions of people in the world who sort of like or super like musicals that don't happen to be in it. What's fun about our show right now, I find, is like we're still talking to our friends. We're talking to our colleagues. We're talking to people we've worked with or people that are one degree of separation away from us. But that's my hope, is that the show becomes guys who like musicals, and then they're like, why is Hillary Clinton on the show? And it's like, well, yeah, because I don't know, we're big and fancy enough that like, we call.
Well, and Hillary Clinton's perfect because she loves musicals.
Yes, like she came to see Frozen and couldn't have been nicer. But like, that's sort of that's the stuff that I see us,
I want to go to a place, and I agree with you that I think that there's a lot to explore there. And I want to get into, this is the nerd side of me, into the psychology behind why people like musicals. Like somebody
like a neurologist, like talk to like that kind of understanding it.
I don't know. Like this is actually something where I've wanted to do some more research. If anybody listening has any suggestions, write me at feedback@thetheaterpodcast.com. Let me know, because I want to talk to some people who are into the science behind why we are so addicted to music and performing. Because there's a vibration to it, right? But what is the science behind that? What's going on chemically in our heads? Why are some people relate to Hamilton, and some people relate to Cinderella, and some people can't get enough of Wicked? Or, I want to. There have been no studies that I am aware of as to why people chemically are addicted to these shows.
Like, what is the dopamine response to sitting in the third row watching an opening night performance of blah blah blah? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
it sounds like a really good documentary.
It really does.
And so our brains cannot.
Dan, you want another job? Look, he's like, wait a minute, we have the. Yeah, we'll talk later.
Does anybody know a behavioral psychologist?
Yeah.
Seriously. I love that
because sociological. There's a lot of stuff.
I had a conversation with my dad about. My dad loves country music and has always loved country music, and he loves show tunes. And one time we like put the pieces together. He's like talking to me, he's like fully embraced my musical theater nerdiness, and he's like fully paying for the tuition for musical theater college. And he's like, I love this theater song and this. And he's always liked country music. And I think that there is something in theater where like there's that crossover just to have a beginning, middle, and end. I started here, something happened, something else happened, and now I'm changed.
Story.
And that story, that true story that like exists in Arlo Guthrie and all those Grand Ole Opry people, and like the music of that era, I think, was so story driven that I think there's a real crossover there that people don't even realize. But yeah, I would love to. I want to hear that interview with your behavioral psychologist about
me too.
Why people like musicals.
Yeah. And when COVID hit, actually going back to something we were talking about earlier with the like numbers overall, because of lack of commuting, podcasting as an industry, the numbers went down, and we were very aware of that. But BPN actually saw double-digit growth during that initial shutdown because
not a big deal.
Well, people wanted it relates to what we were just talking about. NBD. People wanted the arts. People immediately were feeling those chemical withdrawals of not being able to go see shows and not being able to connect with these performers. And so they were turning to the first thing they could get their hands on, which is their on-demand
literally
radio.
In their hands. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, literally in their hands, their podcast with their favorite actors and actresses and creatives and whoever the case may be. So that's since leveled off as things have sort of normalized here in this weird, strange time we now find ourselves in. But it was really, really interesting to us. And that's sort of where I got the idea for all of this, to go down the behavioral science route and the chemical route of just, we know we care. Sometimes people feel it in their bones. Like, I just have to be on stage. I have to act. I have to sing. But that it comes from something. We are just organic beings that are a bunch of molecules bouncing around inside, our physical body. And what is it about that makes us have to be on stage?
Yeah. The have to be on stage one, I think, is a more a question about just like insurmountable egos, but there is definitely a question. I mean, I have had a chemical response to musicals in the form of head to toe chills when I really connect or feel impacted by a musical since I was in the 5th grade, like since I can remember. When I really connect to what's happening in a musical, I get goosebumps from literally head all the way down my back. So there's got to be something chemically there. So I'm hooked. I think that's an awesome idea. I'm in. Let me know if we can help.
I think there's something. I think there's something to like just the spectrum of addiction and like addictive personalities as far as performing is concerned, because it is an absolute drug. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
And I think that, I was listening to Dan and I both love Smartless and that podcast that came out this year, and they were talking to Brendan Shanahan, the hockey player. Brendan Shanahan talking about like how athletes have that. Athletes have this singular focus, and they get their rush and their drive from this one singular thing, that when that thing is taken away, a lot of them can fall into destructive tendencies because they don't have it anymore. And so I think that happens with artists and actors too. It's like when you know how to perform, you know how to sing, you know how to play your instrument or paint or whatever. And then if that's taken away, what do you fill that gap with? What do you fill the space with? And hopefully it's something good. For a lot of people, it's not. I don't know.
Maybe that goes back to the failed actor thing, because you're feeling the depression, you're feeling anxiety, however you internally manifest that. And you feel like a failure, whether you are or not from the outside. You still feel like you're not getting what you want, so you feel like you failed. Right. There you go.
Yeah. We'll get into some science about this. I want to know, Alan, do you have a favorite interview that you've done? Favorite person you've talked to?
Oh, goodness. Well, Joe Carroll, episode 21, of course.
Nice. This one.
This one. Yeah. No, I like lots for different reasons. Patty Murin is one of my favorites because that was the first time I talked with somebody about like as openly as she talks about anxiety, her own anxiety and like having panic attacks on stage and stuff. That was the first time that I allowed myself to go somewhere as deep as my guest was going. Because I have OCPD, which is obsessive compulsive personality disorder, not OCD, completely different thing. So basically, it's can't see the forest through the trees, and I can get so hyper focused on a detail sometime that I just don't see the big picture, and like I'll find myself hours later, like, wait, why did I just spend all that time on that? That's not a big deal, and so that's part of the therapy and whatnot. But so that was the first time I had ever publicly talked about that was with Patty, because she made me feel comfortable enough to do it. Cool. And so that still sticks out as one of my favorites. Isabella Rossellini, just because it's Isabella Rossellini, that was super, super cool. Right as COVID hit, I started the Quarren Queen takeover. So I interviewed all the 6 queens. That was super, super cool because they're just like, that's a show where so empowering. They're all friends. They all like each other. And you can tell by watching it. Did either of you get to see it?
No.
Like you can watch when you watch them on stage, they're there to support each other. And the story is a female empowerment story where they're all supporting each other. And you can tell when they're together and when they talk about each other that there's genuine love for one another. And it was just really cool to see all that come out.
That's awesome.
Yeah. So, and then outside of that, back in December, I interviewed Matthew McConaughey for Google, and that was a lot of fun.
All right.
What about you guys?
He had a really good Smartless episode, Joe. Did you listen? No, it was Dak Shepard. It was Dak Shepard. He was on Armchair Expert. Yeah. And that guy is a freaking character.
I love Dax. Dax is my people are like, who's your ultimate guest? Who would you love to have? Dax is my number one guest I would love to interview.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah, that'd be cool. He seems like an awesome guy.
Who is your favorite interview that you've done, and who is your most coolest person you'd like to interview?
Favorite so far and dream interview. Got it.
I think for me, the day we got to interview Gavin Creel was cool for us because Gavin was kind of this guiding light for the two of us, especially for me. I mean, I've been listening to him like regularly since 2005, and to have him then on my podcast in my living room was a crazy day, and we acted like a bunch of idiots. And it kind of felt like it gave the show some legitimacy. that was just over a year ago, and now I'm like teaching him how to self-tape. The whole world is just upside down. And I can kind of like thank the show for just kind of giving me an outlet for that. And that's, that has, I thank Gavin for coming on, and Shoshana Bean came on really early, and like all of that kind of friends doing friends favors was really helpful for us. But there have been some really great ones, some surprising guests that, you really like end up having a conversation that you didn't expect. Like we just released Nick Blameyer, and Nick has been a mentor to us as a writer, and he's just like a very deep person. So I always like the deep conversations. That's usually like where I gravitate. I think for me, top of list, I don't know, Joe, who is your favorite guest? And I'm gonna think about who my...
Yeah, my favorite, I would totally agree. And we've talked about that before, that like the Gavin episode was completely surreal. It made us feel legit. He is the warmest human being on the planet, and we still feel like imposters on a daily, hourly basis. And he just made us, he made us feel like equals, and really, I think, empowered us to keep going to this point, because now we're like, okay, cool. If we can talk to Gavin Creel, we can talk to anybody. But my favorite, honestly, I had 2. One was Robin Herder, because she's she became such a dear friend to me after my general. Yeah. After my experience working on Moulin Rouge in Boston and in the workshop, we just became like absolute buddy homies, and love her, and so that was really fun to just connect with her because I hadn't seen her in a long time, and she was so funny. And I think she had like two Long Island iced teas while we were talking to her.
She sure did.
And
Like, I'm gonna make another one.
I'm gonna make another one. This is really fun. Let's just keep talking. So that was great. And I like the goofy. I really go. I love getting deep with people, but I really love when we can laugh and have a good time. So I love those episodes. And then when Dan and I argued about The Music Man.
Oh, that's a good one.
We had that episode. We did a segment for previously. We did a segment where we just broke down our favorite shows, and we were talking about like the shows that made us want to do this and what we love about them. And we talked to Matt Doyle about Company, and we talked to Benton Whitley about Into the Woods. And we just had an episode where Dan was like, "The Music Man is the greatest musical of all time. Fight me on."
The week prior, we had Will Burton on the show for the second time. We talked about the Hello Dolly movie because we found the same thing. We were like, we want to kind of talk about stuff on the show that doesn't focus on the pandemic. So let's just talk about movie musicals. Great. So we started like a movie musical segment. We talked about Hello Dolly with Will Burton, and I do not like the Hello Dolly. And Joe and Will think it is the best shit that has ever happened on the planet. And so sure enough, the next week we went to my favorite musical, which was The Music Man, and I was like, be careful. That's how I started the episode. Be careful about what you say because we're about to fight. And we just had like an absolute battle royale because Joe thinks parts of The Music Man is stupid and I think he's stupid. So that's a good call, Joe. That was a great episode.
It was so fun.
We may have to do
really,
like a
really
musical
fun.
theater SmackDown live show. I think that's got to be in the cards for us at some point. It's like having
that's
guests
where like
to fight about what their favorite musical is head to head. I think would be a funny like
and
almost
it's
like
just
a burn
just
book
differing
kind of thing.
opinions.
Yeah.
Yeah, like to throw out like the issue on the table is whatever Les Mis. And then somebody on the pro side, somebody on the con side, and just fight about it. And I think it could be really funny. So we want to do that. And I think that dream guests for me, this is going to sound stupid. I already said Barack Obama and I said Hillary Clinton. The mountain, that's about the top of the mountain. But I want to talk to people like that. Anybody who I think that people who have spent their life in public service for one particular party are just I'm so in awe of what they do. And so I just would love to like actually get to interview somebody who is like that, because like that's what I would love. And then somebody in the same ilk, like to get to interview Patrick Mahomes, to get to interview Sidney Crosby, to get to interview, Tiger Woods or something. Like people, I don't know. I just like people who have absolutely nothing to do with what we do, who happen to be like, oh yeah, like I kind of watched, the Into the Woods movie a bunch when I was a kid. Okay, cool. Sidney Crosby, great talking with you. Like that, I don't know. That's me. So
yeah,
Dan, what do you think?
That's good.
AOC, she's local.
Yes,
AOC for sure.
I'm sure she likes musicals.
I think like for depth, Jim Carrey.
Oh, okay.
And for musical theater royalty, Hugh Jackman.
Oh my God.
The original guy who likes musicals.
Hugh should be doable. Especially when they need to do press for Music Man. There you go. Whenever Broadway comes back. You can be like, we're not going to mention Scott Rudin. But you, Hugh, you like musicals and The Music Man.
Dan, that is such a good idea.
Yep.
And also, he's best friends with Max Clayton, and we're best friends with Max Clayton. So that we are 1 degree of separation away from the president of musical theater.
That's right.
Along those lines, I'd like to have NPH. Neil Patrick Harris would be a lot of fun, I think.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah, Neil Patrick Harris. Of course, Lynn. If Lynn wanted to be on mine, I'd be like, all right, let me pencil you in. But
he's too busy working for Disney now. He's tied up. He's got an overall. He's got too much to do. But it would be cool to have him. He's also a genius. I've really loved that show on Netflix that breaks down the song.
Yes.
That he did. I don't know if you saw that, but if anybody hasn't seen that yet, I don't know what it's called, but it's a documentary show that breaks down songs by artists, and they did one on Lynn, and it's Lynn and Tommy No.
Mm-hmm.
It's Lynn and Alex Lackmore. It's really good.
There's 3 questions I normally ask people to end my interviews. I want to ask you one of the 3 because it should be a short answer. If you could see any show for the rest of your life, but you can see it as many times as you want, what would you see?
Sunday in the Park with George.
Passing
Why?
Strange.
I think I don't remember what you said, Joe. I should go back and listen to it. See if you give the same answer now as you did in episode 21.
I'm pretty sure that I would have said Passing Strange.
Yeah. Okay. Well, cool.
Probably. Yeah. Dan, why Sunday?
I think that Sunday is about the condition of an artist, not the human condition, but the artist condition, what it means to be a creative person and to be so dedicated to. It's actually thematically very similar to Hamilton. There are like ties to this idea of being obsessed with your art and having it like not get in the way of, or being obsessed with the thing that you do and having it get in the way of how the rest of the world functions for you. And that show kind of confirmed for me at a time when I wasn't sure whether or not I wanted to keep pursuing this professionally. That show kind of turned it around for me, and I could listen to it forever, see it forever.
That tie into Hamilton, that was awesome. The connection between, I'd never put that together. Of course Hamilton is inspired by Sunday in the Park with George. That was great.
I think it has to be. I don't think I thought about that until the second, but it totally is.
100%.
Yeah,
you're so right. And then, for me, it's Passing Strange was the show and the Spike Lee filming that took me from questioning whether or not I wanted to do this for the rest of my life when I was a junior in college. I saw that show and I was like, that is what I want to make. It is also a show about the artist experience and art getting in the way of relationships and how, only love is real. Anyway, we did a whole episode on it. So I think most people know how I feel about that show. What about you, Alan?
I think I'm gonna have to go with, and this is pretty cliche, I think I'm gonna have to go with Rent.
Yep.
Because it was it was so new and so different for me that I was into musicals before that. Like I listened to Chicago and Phantom soundtrack, and I grew up watching Singing in the Rain, Music Man, and West Side Story VHS tapes. But then Rent is when the first time I ever got obsessed with something, because again, that was something that spoke to me and I still don't quite know why. And that's the chemical thing that I would love to know. So whenever I think back on Rent with a nostalgia of, especially now as a parent looking back at my kids and seeing the things they enjoy, I look back at that nostalgia that of a time when things were just good and things were just easy and I didn't have to worry about adulting,
Mm-hmm. You could sing about what it's like to not pay your rent, but not even know what you were talking about.
Exactly.
That's amazing. Alan, thank you for everything, for including us in BPN. You are the OG theater podcast. We are following in your footsteps. We love you. For our listeners, check out his. For the listeners of the theater podcast, come check out ours, please.
Yes, please check out Guys Who Like Musicals. There will be links in the show notes of the feeds. I've loved this conversation. This has been so different for me, and I really appreciate it. And thank you both for taking the time to do this.
Absolutely.
Us too, man. Thank you for everything.
Make sure to find me online on Instagram and Twitter at theater_podcast. Find me on the web at thetheaterpodcast.com. Please leave a rating, leave a review, share the podcast with a friend of yours. That's how this podcast grows. Everybody, please subscribe to Guys Who Like Musicals. Special thanks to Joe and Dan for such an incredible and interesting conversation and to give us all a little bit of something different here to listen to. Everybody have a wonderful day.
Take a deep breath, make the world a little colorful.